9 protein powder brands to avoid. The shocking truth about what's really in your shake. Stop. Before you take another sip of that protein shake, you need to hear this. What if I told you that the supplement you're drinking every single day, the one you trust to keep you healthy and strong, might be quietly poisoning you? What if the brands sold at Costco, Walmart, and GNC, the ones recommended by trainers and doctors, are loading your body with heavy metals that accumulate in your bones and kidneys for years? This isn't a conspiracy theory. This is documented evidence from Consumer Reports and the Clean Label Project, organizations that tested over 134 protein powders and found something terrifying: lead, cadmium, and arsenic in the most popular brands in America. The brands you trust, the brands in your kitchen right now. Here's the cruel irony that makes this even worse. Seniors, the people who need protein the most, are being targeted by an industry that's systematically failing them. Research from the European Society for Clinical Nutrition and Metabolism proves that adults over 60 need more protein than younger people, not less. Between 1.0 and 1.2 grams per kilogram of body weight daily, compared to just 0.8 for younger adults. Why? Because of sarcopenia, the progressive muscle loss that steals 3 to 8% of your muscle tissue every decade after age 30. By 80, half of all seniors are living with it. So the protein powder industry targets this vulnerable demographic with precision. They promise strength, independence, graceful aging. They offer convenient solutions for people who find preparing protein-rich meals exhausting. And then they deliver contaminated products that accumulate toxins in aging bodies that can't efficiently filter them out. The worst part? This is all completely legal. The Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act from 1994 treats supplements as presumed safe unless proven otherwise. No FDA testing before products hit shelves. No enforceable limits on heavy metals. Today, we're exposing 9 protein powder brands you should avoid, the shocking contamination findings behind them, and the 2 alternatives that are actually safe. By the end, you'll know exactly what's been hiding in your shakes and what to do about it. 1. Body Fortress Super Advanced Whey Protein, the heavy metal revelation. Body Fortress markets itself as affordable gym nutrition for serious athletes. The packaging shows muscular bodybuilders. The price, often $15 to $20 for 2 pounds, makes it accessible to young lifters and budget gym goers. Then the Clean Label Project published their findings. In 2018, this nonprofit tested 134 top-selling protein powders for heavy metals, BPA, pesticides, and contaminants. Body Fortress products were among those that showed detectable levels of lead, cadmium, and arsenic. Open a container and notice the smell. There's something chemical underneath the artificial chocolate or vanilla scent. Mix it with water and notice how it dissolves inconsistently. Taste it and you get artificial sweetness followed by chalky texture, with some users reporting a slight metallic note. Lead accumulates in bones and affects neurological function over time. Cadmium accumulates in kidneys. Arsenic is classified as a carcinogen by health authorities. The FDA doesn't require heavy metal testing for protein powders. Products with detectable contamination can be sold legally as long as levels stay below certain thresholds, but those thresholds assume occasional consumption, not the daily intake many athletes maintain. Body Fortress's response to the Clean Label Project findings? Silence. No public statement, no independent counter-testing, no transparency about sourcing or contamination protocols. Just continued marketing to budget-conscious athletes while the findings remained unaddressed. For high school athletes drinking protein shakes daily during developmental years, contamination findings deserve serious attention. For young gym goers choosing the cheapest option, the savings may come with trade-offs worth considering. Budget protein with concerning independent test results and heavy metals detected in popular products. 2. Muscle Milk Genuine Protein Shake, the name that lied. Muscle Milk has been one of the best-selling protein brands in the world since 2002. The name itself does powerful psychological work. Milk signals wholesomeness. It evokes images of nutrient-rich dairy, calcium, growth, and strength. For athletes and parents alike, the implication is clear. This is milk, optimized for muscle. That assumption is exactly what made Muscle Milk so successful and why its branding deserves closer examination. In 2011, a California class action lawsuit challenged the very premise of the name. The lawsuit alleged that Muscle Milk contains no actual milk, despite the prominent branding. Instead, the product is made from milk protein concentrate and calcium caseinate, processed dairy derivatives, not milk itself. The claim was not that dairy proteins were absent, but calling the product milk was misleading to consumers expecting something closer to real milk.
Cytosport, the company behind Muscle Milk at the time, ultimately settled the lawsuit. The name remained. What changed were the disclaimers, added in smaller print, clarifying that Muscle Milk is not actually milk. Today, the brand is owned by PepsiCo, one of the largest food and beverage corporations in the world. Pick up a bottle and the sensory experience immediately contradicts the mental image the name creates. Shake it and it sounds thick and heavy. Open it and the smell is unmistakably artificial, chocolate or vanilla layered with a faint chemical undertone. Take a sip and the texture is dense, sludgy, coating the mouth almost instantly. That thickness doesn't come from dairy richness. The first ingredient is water, not milk. The protein comes from milk protein concentrate and calcium caseinate, both industrially processed components that are rehydrated and emulsified rather than naturally occurring liquids. To create the creamy mouthfeel consumers associate with milk, the formula relies on canola oil and sunflower oil. In other words, much of the milkiness comes from seed oils, not dairy fat. The sweetness doesn't come from lactose either. Muscle Milk uses asulfame potassium and sucralose, a combination of artificial sweeteners designed to intensify sweetness without adding sugar. The result is a product that tastes sweet, feels heavy, and drinks nothing like actual milk, despite the name working overtime to suggest otherwise. Every bottle contains multiple additives, oils, emulsifiers, and artificial sweeteners, ingredients many athletes actively try to avoid when they believe they're choosing clean nutrition. Yet the branding continues to imply simplicity and wholesomeness. This gap between perception and reality matters most for younger consumers. High school athletes drink Muscle Milk believing it's milk-based nutrition tailored for growth and recovery. Parents buy it assuming it's a better version of chocolate milk. Few realize they're buying a reconstituted protein drink built on water, oils, processed protein isolates, and artificial sweeteners. The 2011 lawsuit didn't accuse Muscle Milk of being unsafe. It raised a simpler, more fundamental question. Does the name accurately describe what's inside the bottle? When a product relies on disclaimers to correct the impression created by its own branding, that question deserves attention. Muscle Milk's story isn't about one formulation choice. It's about how naming and marketing can override ingredient scrutiny. When a word as familiar and trusted as milk is used as a branding shortcut, consumers stop asking questions. And when they stop asking questions, companies face less pressure to align image with reality. In nutrition, clarity matters, because what you think you're drinking and what you actually aren't always the same thing.
3. Ensure Original Nutrition Shake, the medical marketing betrayal. Ensure occupies a uniquely protected space in consumers' minds. This isn't just another protein shake sitting on a supplement shelf, it's medical nutrition. Walk into almost any hospital and you'll see it on trays. Doctors recommend it, nurses distribute it. Abbott Laboratories positions Ensure as doctor-recommended nutrition for elderly patients, cancer patients, post-surgical patients, and people struggling to maintain weight. That medical framing creates an assumption of unquestionable safety, which is exactly why its formulation deserves closer scrutiny. Shake a bottle of Ensure, and the first thing you notice is how thin it is, almost watery. Open it, and there's a distinct artificial vanilla or chocolate smell, layered with a faint medicinal undertone. Take a sip, and the experience is unmistakable, intensely sweet, syrupy, coating the mouth and throat. The sweetness lingers long after swallowing, leaving behind a flavor that feels more pharmaceutical than nourishing. The ingredient list explains why. The second ingredient is corn maltodextrin, a highly processed starch derived from corn that is rapidly broken down into glucose. Maltodextrin has a higher glycemic index than table sugar, meaning it can spike blood sugar faster and more aggressively. The third ingredient is sugar, contributing 15 grams per bottle. For context, a glazed donut contains roughly 10 grams of sugar. This means Abbott Laboratories, a global pharmaceutical company, has formulated a product marketed as medical nutrition for vulnerable populations that relies heavily on maltodextrin and added sugar. That choice isn't accidental. Maltodextrin is inexpensive, easy to digest, and extends shelf life. Sugar improves palatability and encourages compliance. But those benefits come with physiological trade-offs, especially for the populations Ensure is most often prescribed to. The protein source itself raises further questions. Ensure relies primarily on soy protein isolate, one of the least expensive isolated proteins available. Soy isolate allows manufacturers to hit protein targets at low cost, but it's far from the highest quality option in terms of amino acid profile or digestibility compared to whey or mixed protein blends. For cancer patients struggling to maintain nutrition during chemotherapy, the heavy reliance on fast-digesting carbohydrates may conflict with dietary strategies some oncologists recommend, particularly for patients managing insulin resistance or treatment-related metabolic stress. For elderly patients with type 2 diabetes or prediabetes, the blood sugar impact of maltodextrin and added sugar isn't a trivial detail. It's a clinical consideration that should be openly discussed with healthcare providers. What makes this more troubling is not that Ensure exists, but how it is positioned. The medical framing discourages skepticism. Consumers assume the product has been optimized for health, not cost efficiency. Families trust it without reading labels. Patients rarely question it because it arrives endorsed by authority, by doctors, hospitals, and a pharmaceutical brand. Yet Abbott Laboratories has the resources to do better. They could formulate lower glycemic options. They could reduce or eliminate maltodextrin. They could use higher quality protein sources. They could publish clearer rationale for their ingredient choices. Instead, the default product remains a heavily sweetened soy isolate formula marketed to people least equipped to question it. Ensure's story highlights a deeper issue. When nutrition is wrapped in medical legitimacy, marketing decisions become invisible. And when products designed for the most vulnerable prioritize cost, shelf stability, and sweetness over metabolic impact, the conversation we should be having gets quietly sidelined. Medical positioning should invite more scrutiny, not less. 4. Vega Sport Protein, the organic paradox. For years, Vega Sport represented something fundamentally different in the protein industry. It was plant-based. It was organic. It was founded by Brendan Brazier, a professional Ironman triathlete who built the brand around performance, ethics, and clean nutrition. For health-conscious vegans, Vega wasn't just a supplement, it was a statement. People willingly paid $40 to $50 per container, believing they were supporting an athlete-founded company committed to purity over profit. Then, the business reality changed.
In 2016, Vega was acquired by White Wave Foods for $550 million. Just 1 year later, White Wave itself was acquired by Danone, a multinational food conglomerate valued at roughly $27 billion. Overnight, what began as a mission-driven athlete brand became a small product line inside a global corporate portfolio. The branding stayed the same, the messaging stayed clean, but the incentives shifted. In 2018, the Clean Label Project published findings that challenged the very foundation of Vega's appeal. Testing showed that multiple Vega products contained detectable levels of heavy metals, including lead and cadmium. But the most unsettling discovery wasn't limited to Vega alone. It exposed a deeper contradiction in the supplement world. Organic did not mean cleaner. In fact, the testing revealed the opposite. Organic plant-based protein powders often contained higher levels of heavy metals than conventional alternatives. This wasn't an anomaly, it was a pattern. That pattern became impossible to ignore in the Clean Label Project's 2024-2025 analysis. The results were stark. Organic protein powders tested with 3 times more lead than non-organic protein, twice as much cadmium compared to conventional alternatives. 79% of organic plant-based proteins exceeded California Proposition 65 limits, compared to 41% of conventional products.
The reason is rooted in biology, not marketing. Plant proteins, especially pea protein and rice protein, which form the backbone of Vega's formulas, are uniquely susceptible to heavy metal uptake. Plants absorb minerals directly from soil as they grow. If that soil contains naturally occurring lead or cadmium, the plant absorbs it. Organic certification regulates pesticides, herbicides, and synthetic fertilizers. It does not regulate heavy metals already present in the ground. If peas, rice, or cacao are grown in volcanic or mineral-rich soils, which are common in many farming regions, heavy metals accumulate naturally. Organic farming doesn't filter them out. It can actually worsen the issue because organic crops rely entirely on soil mineral content rather than controlled synthetic inputs. This created a bitter irony. People were paying premium prices for Vega specifically to avoid contamination, only to end up with higher heavy metal exposure, not lower. The very label meant to signal safety became a false reassurance. Vega's response to these findings was minimal. The company issued a brief statement emphasizing compliance with existing regulations. No comprehensive rebuttal, no independent third-party lab reports published, no transparency initiative to address consumer concerns directly, just regulatory language and business as usual. For health-conscious vegans who chose plant protein believing it was inherently pure, these findings demand serious reconsideration. For pregnant women who selected Vega assuming organic meant safer for prenatal health, the implications are even more troubling. Heavy metal accumulation, particularly lead and cadmium, is exactly what prenatal guidelines warn against most strongly. Vega's story isn't just about one brand. It's about how ethical branding, organic labels, and corporate consolidation can quietly mask real risk. When clean becomes a marketing identity instead of a measurable standard, consumers are left trusting symbols instead of data. And in nutrition, trust without proof can be costly. 5. Optimum Nutrition Gold Standard Whey. The gold standard tarnished. Optimum Nutrition Gold Standard Whey has dominated the fitness industry for more than 2 decades. The gold tub is iconic. It's stacked in supplement stores, featured in locker rooms, and mixed in gym shakers across the world. For millions of lifters, it isn't just a product, it's the reference point. The phrase gold standard itself implies safety, reliability, and superiority. This is the protein powder people trust without thinking twice. That trust makes the reality more troubling.
Optimum Nutrition is owned by Glanbia, a multi-billion-dollar Irish dairy and nutrition conglomerate with annual revenues exceeding $4 billion. This is not a small startup cutting corners to survive. Glanbia has the scale, capital, and infrastructure to source the cleanest whey available, test every batch rigorously, and publish transparent third-party laboratory results. If any company in the supplement industry has the ability to set a true safety benchmark, it is this one.
Yet testing conducted by the Clean Label Project found that Optimum Nutrition Gold Standard Whey contained detectable levels of heavy metals, including lead and cadmium. Not theoretical risk, not trace speculation, detectable contamination in one of the most widely consumed protein powders on the planet. This matters because protein powder is not used casually. Athletes don't take it once a week. They take it daily, often twice per day. 2 servings per day equals 730 servings per year. Over 5 years, that becomes 3,650 servings. If each serving contains even small amounts of lead or cadmium, the question stops being, is it detectable, and becomes, what does long-term accumulation look like? Heavy metals don't simply disappear from the body. Cadmium, in particular, accumulates over time, primarily in the kidneys and bones. Chronic exposure has been associated with kidney dysfunction, bone density loss, and cardiovascular risk. When exposure is repeated thousands of times, even low levels begin to matter. Perhaps most concerning was Optimum Nutrition's response to the findings. There was no public statement addressing the results, no release of independent lab testing to reassure consumers, no transparency initiative, no explanation, just silence, while marketing continued and consumers remained unaware. For experienced bodybuilders who have consumed gold standard whey daily for years, the cumulative exposure question deserves serious reflection. For college athletes, teenagers, and young adults using it as a primary protein source during critical developmental years, the stakes are even higher. These are populations often told they're making the safe and responsible choice. This isn't about demonizing one brand. It's about what happens when the most trusted product in the category fails a basic purity test. If the gold standard isn't clean, what exactly is the standard? When trust is built through branding rather than transparency, consumers pay the price. And when silence replaces accountability, that trust quietly erodes, serving by serving, year after year. Understanding the chocolate-cadmium connection. Before we conclude, there is one piece of information that can immediately and dramatically reduce your heavy metal exposure, regardless of which brand you use. It's simple, overlooked, and rarely discussed. Avoid chocolate-flavored protein powders. Independent testing has repeatedly shown that chocolate protein powders are not just slightly worse, they are orders of magnitude more contaminated. According to testing highlighted by the Clean Label Project and Consumer Reports, chocolate-flavored protein powders contain up to 110 times more cadmium than vanilla or unflavored versions of the exact same product. Same brand, same protein source, same manufacturing line. The only difference is the flavor. That gap isn't accidental. It comes from cacao.
Cacao trees are grown in tropical regions where volcanic soils are naturally rich in heavy metals, particularly cadmium. These trees are exceptionally efficient at absorbing cadmium from the soil. The metal accumulates in the cacao pods, survives processing, and ends up concentrated in cocoa powder. When manufacturers add cacao to create a chocolate flavor, they are unintentionally but predictably adding cadmium to the final product. The data is stark. Testing consistently shows that chocolate protein powders contain roughly 4 times more lead and up to 110 times more cadmium compared to vanilla or unflavored versions. This isn't a branding issue or a quality tier issue. Even otherwise clean products see dramatic contamination spikes once cocoa is added. What makes this especially concerning is frequency. Protein powder isn't a once-a-week indulgence. Many people consume it daily, sometimes multiple times a day. Cadmium doesn't just pass through the body, it accumulates. Over time, repeated exposure compounds, increasing long-term risk to kidney function, bone health, and cardiovascular systems. The solution doesn't require changing your entire diet or spending more money. It's a single decision. If you use protein powder, choose vanilla or unflavored. Add your own flavor if needed: fruit, cinnamon, vanilla extract, anything that doesn't introduce concentrated cacao. Your flavor choice alone can multiply your cadmium exposure by a factor of 110 times. That's not a marginal improvement. That's a risk reduction most people can make today, immediately, without sacrifice. In an industry where consumers are often left powerless, this is one of the rare moments where knowledge gives you instant control. The path forward: what clean protein actually looks like. After examining product after product that failed basic quality and safety standards, a reasonable question emerges: does genuinely clean protein powder even exist? The answer is yes, but only if you understand what clean actually means and how rare it is in this industry. Clean protein isn't about buzzwords. It's not about flashy packaging, influencer endorsements, or claims like advanced formula. Clean protein is defined by what's absent as much as what's included. No heavy metals, no unnecessary additives, no undisclosed processing shortcuts, and verifiable proof to back those claims. Naked whey is one of the clearest examples of what real clean protein looks like. The ingredient list says exactly this: grass-fed whey protein concentrate. That's it. One ingredient. No sweeteners, no flavors, no gums, enzymes, or chemical stabilizers. When you open the bag, it smells like actual dairy, slightly sweet, slightly milky, because it is real food. When you mix it, it doesn't dissolve into a perfectly smooth artificial texture. It clumps slightly, it foams a bit. That's not a flaw, it's minimally processed protein behaving the way natural protein does.
What separates Naked Nutrition from most of the industry is transparency. They publish third-party laboratory testing results, not marketing summaries. Those reports show no detectable heavy metals. They source whey from grass-fed dairy farms and use low-temperature processing to preserve protein structure instead of maximizing yield at the expense of purity. That approach costs more, roughly $1.25 to $1.50 per serving, compared to 70 cents from brands flagged for contamination, but the price reflects verifiable quality, not branding. If this breakdown helped you see the supplement industry differently, like this video, share it with someone who uses protein daily, and subscribe, because informed consumers are the only real accountability this industry has left. Thanks for watching.